the rising cost of living in Surabaya and Singapore. But before I start my presentation, I would like to ask you guys a question, especially for my friends out here. Have you ever experienced this? You're just standing there in the mall, wanting to buy something in Mawar, then suddenly someone stopped you. That's right, that's my mom. She stopped me from buying things in Mawar. What did she say? In this economy? What is happening in this economy? So, as I evaluated, I realized that the rising cost of living is happening in this economy. But what is the rising cost of living? So after some research, I found out by Public Health 2023 that rising cost of living is associated with a cost of living crisis, which occurs when the cost of living everyday essential rises faster than the average income. This situation can lead to financial strain for many individuals and families, particularly among low-income groups who spend a larger proportion of their incomes on necessities. For example, in Indonesia itself, in November 2024, the rising cost of living is only 1.55%. However, in December 2024, it is found that the rising cost of living is 1.57%. This shows a significant impact and rise in every single month. However, the impact of the living cost rising becomes more and more significant when it doesn't associate with the income that one gets in every single month. For example, in Central Java itself, the income is only 1.8 million a month. However, the rising cost of living can rise up to 1.57%. As an impact, when the rising cost of living keeps on continuing and the income itself does not rise, this causes huge trouble for every single individual, especially for households with children and families. Therefore, my scope of this research and my aim of this study is two. The first one, my aim is to evaluate to what extent does the government subsidies help with the rising cost of living. Second is to improve workers' welfare, work productivity, economic stability, and the income and evaluate income inequality. Therefore, I want to know that how the government subsidies program limited to food, housing, healthcare, and transportation can help the rising cost of living. This research is done through two methods, qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is where I collect a lot of data, particularly 80 data, 40 from Surabaya and 40 from Singapore. This is done through questionnaires, Google Forms, and questionnaire papers. The second one is qualitative data. This is where I interview expertise for an expert in the field. The first expert that I interview is Bapak Angkawijaya, a docent from Widya Mandala University, Surabaya. And the second one is Miss Agnes Wahyu, a docent and a teacher in Surabaya European School about economics particularly. This is to know the characteristics, concepts, and preferences of the expert. Therefore, my hypothesis comes to two. The first one is the government subsidies and how it have good benefits towards inflation. The second one is much deeper fact. There are much more deeper factors that cause the rising cost of living rather than the insufficiency of an uneven spread of subsidies. And in here, subsidies focus towards four main things: food, healthcare, fuel, and education. So, as a result of my data and my questionnaire interview, I interviewed 80 people, and here's the result. The first one is I want to evaluate about the price and of basic necessities and how it has increased over the past 5 years. As you can see, most of the respondents based on fuel, healthcare, and food responded that there is a particular living cost increase. For example, in the fuel itself, most of the respondents, almost 50% of the respondents, responded that they experienced a 4 out of 5 increase in the living cost of fuel. For education itself, they experienced that there is a 5 out of 5 increase in the rising cost of living. And for And for the food itself, there is a 4 out of 5 rise in the living cost. The second one is about the helpfulness of government subsidies. Here, I want to evaluate how the government subsidies have helped people throughout their life for the past 5 years. However, we can see that most of the respondents answered from a 2 to a 3. This shows a less helpfulness of the government subsidies and more likely an uneven spread in the government subsidies because some experience the help, but only a minority, but majority doesn't experience the help of the government subsidies. The last one, I want to know about how people manage their income, especially in Surabaya and Singapore. And as you can see, the first question comes to how has your income risen in the past 5 years, and if it does, how much did it rise? And the majority of respondents only answered that they only experienced a 0 to 10% rise in their income. The second one is that how much do you spend mostly on their essentials? And most of the respondents stated that they spent mostly 10 to 20 million a month, and 5 to million a month being the first, and 10 to 20 million a month being the second. And the third one is what percentage of your income do you invest or do you save? However, most of the respondents stated that they only save 10 to 20%, which means when there is an urgent or emergency spending, these people will not be ready to spend their money because they only save 10 to 20% of their income. This shows that there is an urgency towards the money that someone has and the rising cost of living, especially in Surabaya and Singapore. Therefore, we can see that there is a significant rise in the living cost, yet a minimum rise in the salaries, which causes the subsidies to not fully transfer to all people in Surabaya and Singapore. And rather, the cost of living continues to rise day by day. This causes the diminishing quality of life, this causes financial insecurity, and this causes people to be trapped in a cycle of debt where they continue to pay on for their debt rather than for the good quality of life. Because when they continue to pay for their debt every single day, the cost of living continues to rise while their income does not rise. And this causes people to be stuck in their cycle. Well, now the main question is, what is the solution? What is the solution towards this trap of cycle, financial insecurity, and diminishing quality of life? Therefore, I interviewed both of the expertise to know the solutions. And both of the expertise have a similarity towards answering the solution, which is improving the work quality, especially in Surabaya. We do not want to just give subsidies and subsidies and subsidies and continue to live in this cycle of subsidies. Yes, subsidies is good. However, if people do not know how to work and they don't have the passion to work, they wouldn't know how to live without subsidies. People must know how to make their own money and have passion to work. This can be done through increasing the literacy rate. This can be done through giving them seminars and education towards how to improve their work quality, how to improve their income, and how to get both passive and active income. Therefore, do we want to keep being trapped in the cycle of debt? Do we want to be trapped in the cycle of depending towards the government subsidies? Do we want to be kept in the cycle of the low quality of life? I'm pretty sure not. Therefore, let's continue to spread education, awareness, and improve the quality of life and the quality of work in both Singapore and Surabaya. However, improving the quality of work wouldn't work without prayer. Therefore, the biblical perspective for this is Deuteronomy 8 verses 18, which stated that the hard work of human will not work only by the hard work. However, it will be work when God is in there. Therefore, we need to pray for every single work that we do and pray that God will give the best quality of life while also doing our best.